Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Reason We Learn. I'm Deb Philman, mom, homeschooler, educator. Today, I want to talk to you about the tendency for interpersonal victimhood. You may have heard about it in the last couple of weeks. This is the name of a new personality construct described by some researchers who wanted to understand where this sort of victimhood mentality was coming from, or what is it? Is it a personality construct? Is it just something we think we observe, but it's really attached to PTSD from people who've actually suffered some kind of trauma? What is it? Is there something there? And they found that there is. So it's called tendency for interpersonal victimhood. And guess what? You don't have to have experienced trauma to feel it. You can have, but there's absolutely nothing that says everyone who has experienced trauma will develop it. And there are traits that are identical between people who develop it because of real trauma and people who've been socialized into feeling this way, to having a victimhood mentality or personality. Now, why is this relevant to this channel? Well, I cover education and what we're teaching our kids and how it might be impacting them. And I've been talking about social justice education and white fragility in the classroom, or, whiteness training or anti-racist training in the classroom, social justice in the classroom. Megyn Kelly pulled her kids out because they talked about reforming the white kids and so forth. So there's been a movement toward dividing our kids up white and not white, making sure the white kids know they're fragile and they need to work at being anti-racist, or else they are racist because they're white. They're white, and there's such a thing called whiteness, and we need to dismantle that, and we need to address that, and we need to take the supremacy out of it, and all these things. And I've said before on this channel, I think this is very dangerous. I think it is abusive. I think it is a kind of collective guilt that is unearned and punishing to our children who had no role in the things that people are talking about as far as oppression and white supremacy of the past and slavery and so forth. Some very real things that happen, including racism and including even racism that's alive and well today. But to approach every person who is white and say, you're part of this, I think is abusive when you're going as young as 6, which they are, by the way. But the reason I think that it's abusive is it does this. It does what these researchers identify. It deprives these children of the ability to develop their own sense of self and their own identity and their own ability to rely on themselves and feel secure in themselves and be attached to other people socially for genuine reasons, for reasons of shared interests or common goals and values and good, healthy things, the kind of relationships we as parents and a society want them to have that help them build successful, constructive, productive, happy lives, and not have anxious attachments that attach them to people based on some sense of shared victimhood, us against them, we're on this team and you're on that team and we need to fight, or be ready to fight or defend ourselves or attack or whatever the case may be, or exact revenge. These are not healthy in a pluralistic, free society. You don't develop good trust bonds, and you don't have a pluralistic society after a while. After a while, what you have is a tribal society, and we don't want that. That's not what America's about. It's quite literally anti-American. So I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of why this bothers me. Suffice to say, this is bad for our kids. And I'm going to attempt to explain why using some of the material I've pulled from some articles about the study, or an article, I should say. First, the tweet that brought it all to my attention from Sarut. Fascinating new research describes a personality disordered trait exactly as we see in the woke. The features: constantly seeking recognition for one's victimhood, moral elitism, a lack of empathy for the pain of others, ruminating about victimization. Sound familiar? I'm betting some of you as I go along with this are going to say, well, yeah, I mean, this was research. Somebody did research. Yes, they did. And they had to, because we can look at what's happening to people, that they're falling into us, them categories, that they're becoming very tribal, that people are becoming less rational and more emotion driven, that we're seeing people excuse looting and rioting and saying things like, my DNA is on the right side of history because I'm Black. I mean, I literally saw a tweet today where a woman with an MS, by the way, a Master of Science degree that she was proudly touting in her bio on Twitter, these people are saying things that heretofore would be considered objectionable for anyone to say, least of all somebody who's a degreed professional in a social sciences field, okay? Which this person was. So, this is, we're seeing that. So we know the what. What we need to find out is the why. So this kind of qualitative research is really, really important to identify why this is happening and then to put a label on it to say, this is what it is, that this is what characterizes it. So we know we're dealing with something that repeats and we see it's not incidental, it's not anecdotal. This is repeating and this is how it happens and this is how it's enhanced. And then we can figure out hopefully how to treat it because it's not healthy. So one of the first things, I found this article in Scientific American. Actually, Sarit pointed me to it, but it starts off. The article is called "Unraveling the Mindset of Victimhood: Behavior in Society," and the article begins with a little quiz that we can take. We can kind of test ourselves and rate how much we agree with each of these items on a scale of 1, not me at all, to 5, this is so me. It is important to me that people who hurt me acknowledge that an injustice has been done to me. I think I am much more conscientious and moral in my relations with other people compared to their treatment of me. When people who are close to me feel hurt by my actions, it's very important for me to clarify that justice is on my side. So it's not just, you've hurt me and please don't do that. And here's what I'd like for you to do in the future. No, it's justice is on my side. Because I'm hurt, I am virtuous. Because I'm hurt, I'm right. That's a huge leap. Okay. I'm sorry your grade is an F because you didn't turn in the paper. That hurts me. Ergo, I'm on the right side of justice. That's not going to fly. It is very hard for me to stop thinking about the injustices others have done to me. Can you live a happy, productive life if that is the case? And then think about things like the 1619 Project and Black Lives Matter in the classroom and anti-racist training in the classroom. Do these kids get a breath? Did they get a moment to not think or be asked to think, to do the work, to think about the injustices others have done to them? If they're a person of color or LGBTQTI, whatever it is, or to think about the injustices you have allegedly done to others. So, whichever side of the equation you're on, if you're a kid in school, are you going to get a break? Are you going to get to come up for air? So how likely is it it's going to be hard for you to stop thinking? It's going to be nearly impossible for you to stop thinking about this. So the article goes on, and I don't want to read the whole thing to you. I'm trying to pull out the salient point. Okay. The salient points. And the thing I want you to know is that based on the clinical observations and research, the researchers found that the tendency for interpersonal victimhood consists of 4 main dimensions: constantly seeking recognition for one's victimhood, moral elitism, which is extremely dangerous, lack of empathy for the pain and suffering of others, and frequently ruminating about past victimization. So constantly thinking about it. We always try to teach people not let it go, but, try to move on with your life. Don't get stuck in the past and so forth. That used to be what, you had motivational posters about that. Now it's like, no, let's keep talking about it. Let's keep talking about the past. Talk about the past. Progress never happened. It's progressive leading the way, but progress that we fought for over the last 100 years never occurred. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about slavery. We can't keep it farther away than like right here. So, and then as I mentioned, they go on to talk about how, you don't have to have suffered trauma for this to occur. And not all trauma victims show this. In fact, most don't. That's sort of the irony about this. But let's talk about the components of this, the victimhood mindset and so forth. So people who score high on the, the victimhood mindset test that we just did or just looked at have this sense of moral elitism. And so they perceive themselves as having an immaculate morality and view everyone else as being immoral. Moral elitism can be used to control others by accusing others of being immoral, unfair, or selfish while seeing oneself as supremely moral and ethical. Now, where does this come into play in the classroom? Well, again, if you divide the class into the people who have whiteness, and that would include Asians, apparently, and the people who don't, and that the people who have whiteness on their side or whiteness in their past or whiteness is part of their identity, they are the oppressors. They're the bad ones, therefore the immoral ones. And the people who don't are the elite who are free of that. They're clean. They were victims, so they are morally elite. Do you see the problem here? You're a child in school. Please put on your little child cap, okay? You're a child in school and you are being told either that you have the moral high ground, you didn't do anything. You've done nothing. In fact, you weren't even directly victimized in most cases. You're just told the people who look like you were, ergo, you're morally elite, and you therefore have the right to see yourself as being completely unselfish, completely fair at all times. It's not possible for you to be racist at all, but the other person is not possible for them to not be racist. They are literally by definition immoral. Well, now you have all you need to control other people. Nobody wants to be seen that way. So moral elitism often develops as a defense mechanism against deeply painful emotions, a way to maintain positive self-image. And as a result, those under distress tend to deny their own aggressiveness and destructive impulses and project them onto others. The other is perceived as threatening, whereas the self is perceived as persecuted, vulnerable, and morally superior. So now you're the trainer. And this is the weird part. The trainer in the situation, the teacher in the situation is the one perceiving themselves to be the saint, and the person in the class is the sinner, or the person getting the training or being told to do the work is the student is like, well, whiteness, we need to dismantle the whatever it is. Now they can be as abusive as they want to be in their speech. They can go so far as to even call names. They can do things that really genuinely hurt the audience. And in this case, we're talking about children who don't have the vocabulary or the authority to challenge the fact that they're being hurt. And yet they are, by someone who says, you and people like you hurt me, or hurt people who are like me. And it's upside down. It's the exact opposite. So while splitting the world into those who are saints versus those who are pure evil may protect oneself from pain and damage to their self-image, it stunts growth and development. It ignores the ability to see the self in the world and all of its complexities. So for the students on the receiving end who were told you are morally elite, they're not going to grow. The people who are told you're morally inferior are also not going to grow. They're going to organize their thoughts and their behaviors around getting rid of this horrible feeling of I'm a bad person. And in many cases will act against their own self-interest, going out and rioting and looting and engaging in acts of violence, which they might not otherwise have done, but for their desperate need to purify themselves. That is what we have seen. And I believe that this began in their university classrooms and is now finding its way into the schools. So, you have lack of empathy for the pain and suffering of others. Look, you just tore down a Black person's business. You burnt it to the ground, college student. Well, that's okay because I'm on the side of good. I'm on the side of good and, they should be out here fighting with us. And because they're not, they're morally inferior, even though they're also Black. They're just conforming to the white supremacist expectations of them. They've internalized the racism. And because they're not out in the street doing what we're doing, it was justified for us to do this. It's just a store. It's just a business. It's just part of the patriarchy, the hierarchy, the this, the that, whatever they've been taught. And by the way, there's just insurance. So, they don't understand what they're doing, nor do they care, because they are so focused on protecting their own self-image, which is of somebody who is desperately trying to be good and shed their badness. Notice most of them are white. And then on the side of those who are of color, well, this is perfectly okay because you and people like you victimized me. So at the group level, research suggests increased attention to an in-group's victimization reduces empathy. We just talked about that. And even just the priming of victimhood has been shown to increase ongoing conflicts, with the priming leading to reduced levels of empathy toward the adversary and people being more willing to accept less collective guilt for current harm, like I just described. Even just the priming of victimhood. You are a victim. You're a victim. You're a victim. Just tell someone often enough, they believe it. They're especially, an adult. So, in fact, research on competitive victimhood shows that members of groups involved in violent conflicts tend to see their victimization as exclusive. They don't even see what they do to other people. That's how you could hear people engaging in riots, talking about things that happened in the past that didn't even happen to them, as if it was real, like it happened to them and everything they were engaging in was perfectly justified and they had absolutely no recognition of the pain they were causing. To tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, no recognition, didn't care. Just total lack of empathy. It's actually terrifying. And so a group that is completely preoccupied with its own suffering can develop what psychologists refer to as an egoism of victimhood, whereby members are unable to see things from the perspective of the rival group's perspective and unable or unwilling to empathize with their suffering. Again, more of the same. And then, so the consequences of the mindset, okay? So that you develop the mindset of a victim, you maintain it to keep your moral self-image, because if victimhood equals virtue, they're intertwined. You can't separate them. Then you're going to ruminate and keep your victimhood alive, because that's how you keep your sense of moral superiority alive. That's how you keep your sense of self alive. I can't be a good person if I'm no longer a victim. So are you ever going to give up being a victim? Why would you? You have every incentive not to. So the mindset that one develops as a victim or as a perpetrator has a fundamental effect on the way the situation is perceived and remembered. So then they get into some other things about, how they edit their memories to fit all of this. And, it's called memory bias, and how they attribute hurtful behaviors, like things they do don't count, but any small slight, we know that this happens, microaggressions. This becomes, just as bad as if you beat them senseless with a baseball bat. I mean, there's no sense of perspective, but, where does it come from? Where does it come from? We talked about anxious attachment, and what does that do? Okay. At an individual level, many different factors most certainly play a role, including real victimization. Okay. That can happen, but anxiously attached individuals tend to be dependent on the approval and continued validation of others. This is the big problem. They seek reassurance continually, stemming from doubts about their own social value. This leads to anxiously attached individuals seeing others in a highly ambivalent manner. So they're not sure. They have to weigh, they have to look at you and size you up, and are you with me or are you against me? Because I have no internal locus of control. I don't believe in myself. My entire sense of self-worth comes from other people. So I have to first size you up and make sure that you're on my side, you're on my team, and the tribalism is reinforced. They anticipate rejection from other people, and they need other people to validate their self-worth. At the group level, the researchers found that a potential role for socialization processes in the development of collective victimhood. Again, we have the races. They note that victim beliefs, as in the case of any other human belief, can be learned through different channels such as education, TV programs, and online social media. Group members can learn that victimhood can be leveraged as a power play, and that aggressiveness can be legitimate and fair if one's party has suffered. Okay. People may learn that internalizing a victimhood mentality can give them power over others and protect them from any of the consequences of online mobbing and shaming that they may impose on members of the perceived outgroup. So we're teaching our children to have this victim mentality. One of the consequences is what I'm reading to you right now. Is this why you are sending your children to school? Are you sending them to school to be clustered into an in-group or an out-group, to have their identity wrapped up in what other people think of them and what other people have defined as victimhood? Did you hope that the main lesson they would take away as far as social interaction is that in order to be a morally good person, they have to either address the victimhood of other people or constantly ruminate on their own victimhood? Is that something that you, the intelligent, thinking, caring, loving parent out there, want for your child? Do you think that's going to result in a healthy, mentally stable adult? Because I don't. Not at all. So the good news is there's some hope. They say truth is we currently live in a culture where many political and cultural groups and individuals emphasize their victimhood identity and compete in the victimhood Olympics. When these feelings of entitlement are combined with a high individual level tendency for interpersonal victimhood, social change struggles are more likely to take an aggressive, disparaging, and condescending, and violent and destructive form. But they do say that if socialization processes can instill this in individuals, if they can put it in there, then we can teach them something different. That's the good news. That's the good news. And I'm here trying to raise awareness of this so you can hopefully, as parents, teachers, educators, community members, taxpayers, simply demand or walk away from this to somewhere that gives what I'm about to describe to you. And that is, teaching them that our traumas don't have to define us. So if you literally were victimized, and some people are, that doesn't have to define you. If you're part of a group that was victimized or perceives itself to have been victimized, that too doesn't have to define you just because you share traits with that group. In fact, it doesn't define you. You had nothing to do with it. And even if some of the long-term consequences are now kind of affecting your life, or you think they are, or you can make a case that they are, rather than argue they are or they aren't, the better message, rather than challenging whether there's such a thing as systemic racism or there isn't. Let's say there is. Let's say it's rampant. Let's say we're living in Jim Crow world in the 1960s. What are you going to do about it? Tear everything down? Now you got nothing. No. First of all, we don't live in that world. There has been progress. Don't believe the hype. But in addition to that, what if we learned that it's possible to go through all of this and grow and change, and that we have individual agency, and that we are who we decide that we are? We are who we believe that we are. It's funny because in the same world in which we can say, I know I was born with an XY chromosome, but I believe that I'm really a woman. And everybody goes, yes, of course you are, because you believe it. Well, why can't you be born white and believe you're a good person? Why can't you be born black and believe you're not a victim? Of course you can. Of course you can. People do it every day. People succeed beyond their wildest dreams because they believe they can, irrespective of whatever traumas they personally or their people or families of origin or whatever have gone through. Because it doesn't define you. Those identity markers are not who you are. They're just not. So if we taught our children that, instead of this victimhood mentality, we would make a whole lot more progress. And I thought the whole term progressive was about making progress, not reversing progress, which is what this does. Forget reverse it. This is damaging. This is dangerous. This is Lord of the Flies level dangerous, if they're even allowing people to read that book anymore, which I doubt. Anyway, if you like this content, and I hope that you do, if you find it useful, and I hope that you do, I hope you'll like this channel, subscribe to this channel, like this video, comment in this video, share this video, and that's the video.